So really, and it's also about loving ourselves and trusting ourselves enough to know what is within. And I think sometimes what I notice when I work with people and we're kind of trying to, like, we set up that space and we make that commitment to listen, and begin to feel what the voice of your soul does sound like and how it's speaking to you. And often you might find, and I've found many times when I don't listen, our body is the vehicle for our soul. And if we're not listening, sometimes it will come through my body in sort of rather drastic ways when I'm not listening. And so that's often the first thing that we can do, is really listen to our bodies, and whether we have symptoms or things that we're experiencing, really going into our bodies and asking, what is this? What are you trying to show me? And also doing that through a daily practice, maybe, of like feeling into our body and asking if there's any messages. That's often a good way to start. And then, yeah, beginning to listen to how else our soul speaks to us once we've made that commitment and decision to listen. And I'll do a little meditation and practice in a minute where we can start to tune in a bit better. And it's something that you might want to use more regularly. But listening, like, how does your soul speak to you? And sometimes it's a sensation that we're used to kind of shutting off from, and it's always there, but it's just recognizing it, like whether it's this deep inner knowing. And like, I feel like a deep inner knowing, like deep within me, deep within the core of my being, that's not like a normal voice or something that I would associate with anything rational, but it's just a like more visceral feeling within my body, and a deep inner knowing. And I know lots of people find how they listen is very, very different. And so it's about reconnecting back to yourself. And often this is going to be a journey, like it's a journey to trust and love yourself, a journey to remove distractions, and a journey to really trust as well, because once you do start listening to your soul, it doesn't often make sense in the rational world. So yeah, when I do help people like begin to connect, and then they start receiving more messages, and kind of inner knowings and understandings about what's actually going on, it often doesn't make sense. And that brings me back to what I was saying about in the world of medicine. I've seen many people say, I know what's going on, I know what my body's telling me, and surrounded by like a group of doctors that say, no, that doesn't make sense, the studies don't verify it. And I've had one lady just crying, going, but I know. And then in the end, she was right. And I just remember the look in her eyes going, but I knew, that feeling when she knew, but it doesn't make rational sense. So I think sometimes it's about learning to trust, even when the rest of the world is telling you that it doesn't make sense. But again, it's getting the balance, isn't it? And that's the balance we're looking for. We're not just going back to solely relying on intuition, but it's how it works with reason and how we can, find this beautiful balance. And that's what I was talking about, these old prophecies of talking about this is the time when like the eagle and the condor will fly together. And one represents like intuition and the heart, and the other one represents logic and the mind. And how do we find a balance between these? But sometimes first we've got to go the other way, because we've got so shut off from our intuition, our inner voice. So maybe sometimes the first step is just really feeling into that. And if you find it hard to trust the answers that you get, I always feel it's best to start small. And what I often do is how I started to learn to listen to the voice of my soul. I started getting messages, and I just started writing them down, and I didn't tell them to anyone, and I didn't often really look at them. I just wrote them down as they happened. And then in time, I started to begin to make sense of them and see how that they were speaking to me, and how over more time they kind of became true. Things that I saw in the future and things that I would have just ignored before. But the more I started writing them down, it's about making that commitment as well, I think. I actually validated them. I wrote them down. Maybe I didn't tell them to anyone, but I gave them enough respect to write them down in my journal. um, and then as I looked at them over the years, I started to see that, yeah, they were something. And then I wrote more and more, and then more started coming. And yeah, some of the things I still am a bit blown away that I'm writing down, and I'll believe them probably in a few years' time. But yeah, so basically it's a journey, and we're going to do a process now in a second. But really, I think listening to the voice of your soul is about remembering and undoing. So that's what we're going to start doing today. But obviously, it's not going to come straight away. And it is a journey. And sometimes this is a whole journey of healing, coming back to yourself and remembering your power, remembering your inner wisdom. And it does take a lot of undoing. And sometimes it's scary because it's not the normal way of doing things. But we can just take things step by step. And like I said, I think that very first step is just making the commitment